Official plea to President Donald Trump, the United States Congress, and the Supreme Court of the United States subject, hypocrisy in immigration policy, civil rights violations against American citizens, and the need for justice and accountability as a concerned U.S. citizen. I, Darren Fonzseau, am compelled to address the glaring injustices and double standards surrounding immigration policy under the leadership of President Donald Trump. This plea is an official request for acknowledgement and action from President Trump, the United States Congress, and the Supreme Court of the United States. My American heritage: I trace my family's roots in America back to Thomas Jefferson, a founding father and U.S. president, on my mother's side. On my father's side, my grandparents, whom I never had the chance to meet, immigrated from France. As a white male American with deep ancestral ties to this nation, I am deeply offended and hurt by the lies and hypocrisy perpetuated by President Trump's policies. These actions harm me, my family, and our civil rights as American citizens. Melania Trump's immigration journey: a case of privilege. Melania Trump immigrated to the United States in 1996 on a visitor visa. While she later transitioned to H-1B work visas, reports from the Associated Press revealed that she performed at least 10 modeling jobs worth $20,056 during a 7-week period before obtaining proper work authorization. Such actions violate immigration laws, and ordinary undocumented workers often face severe consequences for similar infractions, including deportation and bans on reentry. In 2001, Melania obtained a green card through the EB-1 program, a visa category reserved for individuals with extraordinary ability. While her modeling career was notable, critics have questioned whether she truly met the program's stringent criteria. Many believe her connections to influential figures played a significant role in her successful application, underscoring a system that prioritizes the privileged over the deserving. President Trump's hypocrisy on immigration: under President Trump's administration, some of the most restrictive and punitive immigration policies in modern U.S. history were enacted. These included family separations, a travel ban targeting predominantly Muslim countries, and increased deportations of undocumented individuals, even those married to U.S. citizens. Yet, the same administration conveniently ignored Melania Trump's period of unauthorized work and celebrated her immigration story as an example of doing it the right way. Adding to this hypocrisy is the fact that President Trump's businesses have a documented history of hiring undocumented workers. Reports have revealed that undocumented immigrants were employed for years at Trump properties, including as housekeepers, landscapers, and construction workers. These workers were instrumental in building and maintaining the very empire Trump used to catapult himself to the presidency. Yet, they faced termination and public condemnation when their stories came to light, further highlighting the double standards in Trump's immigration rhetoric and actions. Violations of civil and human rights: perhaps the most egregious element of President Trump's immigration stance is his public ultimatum to American citizens married to undocumented immigrants: either send their loved ones away alone or leave the country themselves. This policy disregards the constitutional rights of American citizens and their children, many of whom are U.S. born. It forces families into impossible decisions, tearing apart lives and causing emotional and financial devastation. As a U.S. citizen, I call foul on this gross violation of civil and human rights. It is unacceptable that my fellow Americans are told to abandon their own country simply because of their marital or familial ties. Such a policy is rooted in bigotry and disproportionately impacts families of color, particularly those with ties to Latin America. The anchor baby fallacy: Donald Trump's frequent use of the term anchor baby to criticize birthright citizenship reveals yet another layer of hypocrisy. By Trump's own standards, his son Darren Trump, born in the U.S. to Melania while she was still navigating her immigration process, could be labeled an anchor baby. However, this term is never applied to affluent or high-profile families. Darren's birthright citizenship was never questioned because of his family's wealth and status, highlighting the selective and prejudiced nature of such rhetoric. A call for accountability and reform: President Trump, Congress, and the Supreme Court must confront these contradictions and inequities. Millions of hardworking immigrants and their families are trapped in a system that separates loved ones, denies basic humanity, and privileges the wealthy and well-connected. Meanwhile, U.S. citizens married to undocumented immigrants are forced to navigate a labyrinth of legal barriers, often with no viable path to justice. I demand an official acknowledgement of the hypocrisy in President Trump's immigration policies and actions. A commitment from Congress to reform immigration laws, ensuring that they uphold the civil and human rights of all individuals, regardless of economic or social status. Intervention from the Supreme Court to protect the constitutional rights of U.S. citizens affected by draconian immigration policies. Conclusion: this plea is not just a call for justice, it is a demand for accountability. Melania Trump's immigration story, marked by unauthorized work and privileged access to elite visas, contrasts sharply with the experiences of millions of immigrants and their families, who face systemic barriers and prejudice. President Trump's policies have exacerbated these inequities, targeting vulnerable communities while shielding the privileged. As a U.S. citizen with ancestral ties to both the founding of this nation and immigrant heritage, I refuse to remain silent as my fellow Americans are told to abandon their country or their families. No, Mr. President, you do not get to violate the human and civil rights of me and my American-born children. If anyone should leave, it is those who seek to undermine the very principles this country was built upon. This is a fight for the soul of our nation, and I urge our leaders to rise to the occasion and enact meaningful change. The selective enforcement of immigration laws and the demonization of undocumented workers are not only injustices but also threats to the fabric of our democracy. It is time for America to live up to its ideals and ensure fairness and dignity for all who call this nation home. Subject: violations of civil, constitutional, and human rights in immigration enforcement to the Honorable President Donald Trump, members of Congress, and justices of the Supreme Court. This is a plea on behalf of millions of American citizens whose civil and constitutional rights are being systematically violated through current immigration enforcement practices. I, Darren Fonzseau, as a U.S. citizen with ancestral ties to Thomas Jefferson and immigrant heritage, write to expose the devastating impacts of these policies on American families. Violations of constitutional rights: the 14th Amendment guarantees due process and equal protection under the law. Immigration policies that force U.S. citizens to choose between separation from their undocumented spouses or leaving the country violate these protections. The Supreme Court in Loving v. Virginia affirmed marriage as a fundamental right, while Moore v. City of East Cleveland upheld familial association as a protected liberty. Current policies undermine these precedents, discriminating against an entire class of citizens. Double standards and discrimination: the Trump administration's immigration policies disproportionately target families of color and working-class citizens, violating equal protection. Meanwhile, President Trump's businesses employed undocumented workers for years, demonstrating a blatant double standard that privileges the powerful while punishing the vulnerable. Human rights obligations: family unity is a core principle of international human rights law, recognized in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Policies separating families or coercing U.S. citizens to leave their country breach these obligations, eroding America's commitment to human dignity. A plea for millions of families: this plea represents countless Americans whose families are torn apart by unconstitutional policies. Veterans, essential workers, and taxpayers are among those facing impossible choices: to abandon their country or their loved ones. These policies disproportionately harm working-class citizens, depriving them of resources and legal recourse. Demands for action: immediate policy review, end practices that compel family separation or force citizens to leave their country. Enforce constitutional protections, pass legislation ensuring citizens married to undocumented immigrants are not penalized. Public accountability: acknowledge the harm caused by discriminatory policies and commit to reforms. Conclusion: America's immigration policies must align with its constitutional principles and human rights commitments. President Trump's directive that U.S. citizens should leave their country with undocumented family members is unconscionable and legally indefensible. I call on the administration, Congress, and the Supreme Court to act immediately to protect the rights of all Americans. Justice delayed is justice denied. This is a fight for the soul of our nation and for the principles of liberty, fairness, and dignity for all. Respectfully, Darren Fonzseau on behalf of millions of concerned citizens and families.
Mr. Trump, can you hear our call? We're the ones who build it all. From the factories to the open roads, we carry the weight, we bear the loads. But when our families cry for a chance, your silence hits like a cold romance. Our kids are called anchor babies, why? While yours and Vance's get to soar and fly. Tell me, Mr. Trump, how is it fair? We're American workers left gasping for air. Our kids are anchors in this land of dreams, while your elite float downstream. We're the truckers, the builders, the ones who care. Don't let our families drown in despair. J.D. Vance and Melania, they've got their way, but our spouses are left in the fray. We sweat and toil, we pay our dues, but the system picks and chooses who. The Teamsters say they stand for us, but their silence makes it hard to trust. We're union strong, but where's our fight for families clinging to hope each night? Tell me, Mr. Trump, how is it fair? We're American workers left gasping for air. Our kids are anchors in this land of dreams, while your elite float downstream. We're the truckers, the builders, the ones who care. Don't let our families drown in despair. We're not asking for handouts or gold, just the right to keep our loved ones to hold. The American dream should lift us all, not let the working families fall. Faith unions, leaders of the land, where's the justice, the helping hand? We're calling out with voices strong. Together we can right this wrong. Tell me, Mr. Trump, how is it fair? We're American workers left gasping for air. Our kids are anchors in this land of dreams, while your elite float downstream. We're the truckers, the builders, the ones who care. Don't let our families drown in despair. From the highways to the factory floors, we've given this country all and more. Mr. Trump, we're holding you to task for fairness, justice, that's all we ask. Don't let our dreams be cast away. Stand with us, keep families to stay.